My stepmother left me at an airport when I was 14. Alone. No phone. No money. No explanation. She boarded the plane with my father and my half-brother and flew to a beach vacation while I sat on a plastic chair next to a Hudson News, completely bewildered. What she told my father to make that possible, I didn't find out for 17 years. But when I did, she had about 72 hours before her entire carefully constructed world came apart. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm 31, I work in IT infrastructure for a logistics company in Ohio, I own a house that needs more work than I have weekends, and I have a black lab named Biscuit who I love more than most people I've met. I'm the kind of person who returns shopping carts, keeps receipts, and reads the full terms of service, which, yes, I know makes me a specific kind of insufferable, but it has also saved me more than once. My mother died in a car accident when I was 8. My father remarried when I was 12. His new wife, my stepmother, was the kind of woman who performed warmth rather than felt it. She was attentive in public and distant the moment the audience left. She had a son of her own, 7 years old when they married, and the way she lit up around him versus the way she looked at me was a contrast so obvious it felt almost lazy. I don't want to be unfair. The first 2 years were tolerable. Then something shifted. I couldn't name it at the time. I was 12, then 13, trying to get through middle school and keep my head down. But looking back, I can see the pattern forming. Every time I connected with my father, a real conversation, a movie night, any moment that was ours, she would find a way to insert herself, redirect him, or manufacture a crisis involving her son that needed immediate attention. She was running a slow, deliberate campaign, and I was too young to recognize it as one. The trip was to Myrtle Beach. End of June, right after school let out. My father had been planning it for months. It was supposed to be a reset, some bonding time, his words. We drove to Columbus Airport together, all 4 of us. She was pleasant in the car, talking about the hotel pool, asking me what I wanted to do first, laughing at something on the radio. I remember thinking she seemed genuinely in a good mood, which should have been the first warning sign. We got through check-in without a problem. My father had the boarding passes on his phone. We went through security together. My stepmother suggested stopping at a food court place near our gate, said she'd grab food while my dad took her son to the bathroom. She told me to watch the carry-ons. Normal enough. Don't wander, she said. Stay right here with the bags. I sat down. I watched the bags. I waited. I watched the departure board flip my flight from on time to boarding to final call to departed. They never came back. I'm going to pause here and just say, the specific flavor of confusion that comes with realizing your family has boarded a plane without you is genuinely unlike anything else. It's not panic, not immediately. It's more like your brain keeps rerunning the scenario, looking for the version where it makes sense. The version where there's a reasonable explanation. I sat there for probably 20 minutes, just waiting for the reasonable explanation to arrive. It did not arrive. An airline employee named, I'll just call her the gate agent, found me still sitting there after the gate had cleared. She was calm and methodical and clearly had training for exactly the situation, which is somehow both reassuring and devastating. She walked me to a customer service desk. She asked for my father's name. She asked for any phone number I knew. I knew my grandmother's number. My mother's mother. She lived 40 minutes away. Can you call her? I asked. She did. My grandmother answered on the second ring. I heard the gate agent explain the situation in professional, careful language. I heard the silence on the other end. Then my grandmother said, I'll be there in 35 minutes. She made it in 28. She didn't cry in front of me. She thanked the gate agent. She put her hand on my shoulder. She walked me to her car. When we got inside, she sat for a moment without starting the engine. Did your stepmother say anything to you before this happened? She asked. She told me to watch the bags, I said. My grandmother nodded slowly, like that confirmed something she'd already suspected. My father called 3 hours later. He said there had been a terrible miscommunication. He said my stepmother thought I'd gone to the restroom, and that by the time they realized I wasn't with them, it was too late to get off the plane. He sounded genuinely upset. He apologized. He said they'd fly me down once they landed and got sorted, or come home early, whatever I needed. I said okay. I said I was fine. I was 14, and I wanted desperately to believe the miscommunication story, because the alternative, that my stepmother had deliberately left me there, was a thought so cold I couldn't hold it yet. My grandmother, sitting in the armchair across from me, said nothing. But she had this look. The kind that means I know something you don't, and I'm going to let you figure it out yourself, because that's the only way it'll stick. I should have asked her what that look meant. I didn't, and it would cost me 17 more years. I didn't go to Myrtle Beach. My father offered twice more, then stopped offering. My stepmother sent a text that said, "So sorry, honey. It was all so chaotic," the kind of apology specifically designed to close a conversation rather than address anything in it. I stayed with my grandmother for a week, went home, and life resumed. But something was different. My father became more careful around me after that. Not warmer, more careful. Like he was watching himself. There were things he didn't say, pauses where words should have been. A birthday dinner that year where he kept glancing at my stepmother before answering even basic questions I asked him. I filed all of it away, without fully understanding why. By 17, I had a part-time job and a plan to get out as soon as I graduated. By 18, I did. A college in Cleveland on a partial scholarship, filled the gap with loans and 25 hours a week at a campus IT help desk. I was fine. I kept my head down, I kept working, and I kept a polite arm's-length relationship with my father that involved holiday visits and phone calls that never went too deep. My stepmother was always there for the holiday visits. Performatively gracious. She'd hug me at the door and ask about my job and compliment whatever I brought for dinner. My half-brother, as he grew up, was actually decent, no fault of his for who his mother is. He and I have a fine relationship. He once told me, when he was about 19 and a few beers in, "She's exhausting, man. Always managing everything." I let that sit without commenting. The thing that broke everything open was not dramatic. It was a cabinet. My father had a mild stroke at 61. He recovered well, caught early minimal lasting effects. He was genuinely lucky, but it prompted a period of getting his affairs in order. I came down to help for a weekend. My stepmother was at her sister's. My father and I spent 2 days going through paperwork, updating beneficiaries, reviewing insurance documents. The most time we'd spent alone together in probably a decade. Something loosened between us in those 2 days. We ordered pizza and watched baseball, and he laughed at things in a way that felt real. On the second night, going through a filing cabinet in his office, I found a folder I didn't recognize. It had my name written on the tab. Not my full name, just my first name, in my stepmother's handwriting. "Dad, what's this?" He turned around from across the room and went very still. Inside the folder was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. Supposedly written by me. Dated 3 days before the Myrtle Beach trip. It said, in language that read like a legal document filtered through a teenager's vocabulary, that I didn't want to be part of the family, that I was planning to stay with my grandmother permanently, and that I was only going on the trip to cause problems. I had never written that letter. I had never seen it before that moment. I looked at my father. He was looking at the floor. "She showed me that before the trip," he said. "Said she found it in your room. Said you've been planning to run away during the vacation, and she was scared of what might happen." The room went quiet enough that I could hear the neighbor's sprinkler outside. "And you believed it?" I said. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. "So she left me there on purpose," I said. "And you let her tell you a story that made it okay." I didn't know what to believe. "You were so withdrawn that year," and she said, "Dad." I set the paper down on the desk. I was withdrawn because she made me feel like a stranger in my own house. I was 14. I wanted to see the beach. He put his head in his hands. Not a performance, he was genuinely wrecked. And I sat with the fact that I had spent 17 years halfway blaming myself for something that was entirely engineered. That letter was forged. I knew it immediately. My handwriting at 14 had a specific leftward slant I spent years trying to correct, and this was perfectly upright. Whoever wrote it had copied my signature from something else. The shape was right, but the pen pressure was wrong. I'm not a handwriting expert, but I do have eyes. I took the letter with me when I left. My father said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to think." Which was true. I needed a few days to figure out what I was actually holding and what the smartest thing to do with it was. My stepmother got back 2 days later. She called me, very warm, very normal, to say it had been so nice having me around and that she hoped we'd do it again soon. She had no idea I'd found the folder. She was operating on 17 years of safe distance, totally confident that the story she'd built was permanent. That confidence was about to become a real problem for her. Because what she also didn't know was that when I mentioned the letter to my grandmother, just a process, not yet with a plan, my grandmother was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "I need to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." My grandmother had kept a voicemail. 17 years old, saved deliberately, backed up to a CD-ROM at some point in the early 2000s because my grandmother is the kind of woman who does not throw things away and does not trust hard drives. She had transferred it to her computer years later, and it was sitting in a folder labeled, with zero fanfare, Airport. The voicemail was from my stepmother. Left the morning of the Myrtle Beach trip, before we even left for the airport. She told my grandmother, calmly, pleasantly, like she was leaving a reminder about a dentist appointment, that I had been really struggling and that there was a real possibility I might try to come stay with her during the summer. She said she wanted my grandmother to know in advance, so she wouldn't be caught off guard. She said she was worried about me and just wanted everyone to be prepared. She called my grandmother before she even got to the airport. She set up the landing before she executed the departure. I sat in my car after that call with my grandmother, and I just stared at my steering wheel for a while. I'm a fairly measured person. I don't typically do anything out of rage. Rage makes you sloppy. But I want to be honest. There was a period of about 4 days where I was not fully measured. I went to work, I did my job, I fed Biscuit, I kept everything functional. But underneath that I was running calculations I hadn't run in a long time. Then she made her first move, which told me she'd somehow gotten wind that something was shifting. She called my father and told him, in tears, that she was sensing a lot of tension from me lately and that she was worried about what it might mean for his recovery. His health had to come first, didn't it? Wasn't family conflict the worst thing for someone post-stroke?
She cried.
My father, who is a good man trapped in old patterns, called me to gently ask if everything was okay. That was dirty trick number 1. She was trying to make herself the victim before I could make her the subject. "Everything's fine, Dad," I said. "I'll call you later this week." Then I called an attorney. Not a family attorney, a civil litigator I found through a recommendation from a coworker whose landlord dispute had gone extremely well. I explained the situation. I brought the letter. I described the voicemail. He listened, asked methodical questions, and told me what I was actually holding. The letter, if verified as forged, was potentially actionable. Fraud, potentially defamation depending on what my father had done in reliance on it. The voicemail demonstrated premeditation. She'd set up the alibi before the act. He said a forensic document examiner could authenticate my claim about the handwriting and that a formal declaration from my grandmother about the voicemail would carry significant weight. "What do you want the outcome to be?" he asked. "I want her to not be able to rewrite what happened," I said. "And I want my father to have a clear record of the truth." He told me what that would require and what it would cost, and I said let's do it. Dirty trick number 2 came 2 weeks later. My stepmother contacted my half-brother, her son, and told him I was trying to break up the family. She had apparently decided that her best remaining move was to use him as an intermediary. He called me, uncomfortable, clearly not wanting to be having this conversation. "She's saying you're planning to go after her legally or something," he said. "What's going on?" "She forged a letter in my handwriting when I was 14, I said, to justify leaving me at an airport. A very long silence. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I said, "but I'm not stopping." He said, "Okay," and that was that. He didn't call again on her behalf. Dirty trick number 3 was the most aggressive. She went to my father's estate attorney, a different attorney from my litigator, and suggested, with carefully worded implication, that I had become erratic since his stroke and that she was concerned about undue influence over him. She was trying to preemptively discredit anything I might introduce to his estate planning. The estate attorney, to his credit, called my father directly. My father told him the truth. The estate attorney documented it. She had played every card available to her, and each one had landed on a table I'd already prepared. I had the forensic document examiner's report back within 6 weeks. 3 pages, methodical and specific. Inconsistent pen pressure, unusual baseline uniformity inconsistent with natural adolescent handwriting, and a signature that appeared traced rather than written. It concluded the document showed characteristics consistent with deliberate imitation rather than authentic juvenile authorship. I had a written, notarized declaration from my grandmother documenting the voicemail, its contents, and its timestamp. I had my father's written account of what my stepmother had told him before the trip, and what the letter had caused him to believe. What I had, sitting in a folder on my desk, was the complete documented truth of what happened the morning of June 27th, 17 years ago. And I was about to deliver it in a way she would not be able to close down, spin, or cry her way out of. I invited them both to my father's house for dinner. My idea. I framed it as wanting to clear the air, which was technically accurate if you define clear the air as present documented evidence of a 17-year-old fraud while an attorney's letter sits in my jacket pocket. My half-brother was not invited, by his own preference. He texted me that morning, "Good luck. You've got this." Which honestly meant more than he probably knows. My stepmother arrived looking completely composed. She had the particular stillness of a person who has survived difficult conversations before by controlling the temperature of the room. She poured herself a glass of water, sat down, and smiled at me like we were about to discuss Thanksgiving plans. I put the folder on the table. "I want to talk about Myrtle Beach," I said. Her expression didn't change. "That was a long time ago, sweetheart." "It was," I said. "Here's what I've put together since then." I opened the folder. I walked through each item in order. The letter, the forensic report, the voicemail summary, my grandmother's declaration, my father's written account. She interrupted twice. "The first time, I don't know where you got that letter, but I never." "The forensic examiner's report is on page 2, I said. "The second time, your father's memory has been affected since his stroke. You can't just take his word." My father, quietly from across the table. "My memory is fine." She went still. "Here's what I'm not doing," I said. "I'm not filing a civil suit, though my attorney tells me I could. I'm not going to the police, though abandoning a minor is a criminal matter in Ohio and the statute of limitations on fraud is 4 years from discovery, and I discovered this 11 weeks ago." I watched her process that last part. "What I am doing is ensuring that my father's estate documents accurately reflect the full history of this family, and that this entire record, the report, the declarations, the voicemail, everything, is formally attached to those documents and held by his attorney." "You want money," she said. Her composure cracked for just a moment. "That's what this is." "I want the truth to exist somewhere that can't be deleted," I said. "That's it." My father said, "It's already done. I had it updated last week." She looked at him. Then she looked at me. Then she picked up her glass of water, set it down without drinking from it, and stood up. "This family," she said, in this tight, controlled voice, "will never forgive you for this." "The family I lost is already gone," I said. "I'm just making sure the paperwork reflects why." She left. I heard the front door close. My father sat across from me, and we were quiet for a while. "I should have known," he said. "I should have questioned it the moment she showed me." "Yeah," I said. "You should have." It wasn't cruel, the way I said it. It was just true. And he accepted it. We ordered Thai food. We watched the rest of a baseball game. It was the most normal evening we'd had together since I was maybe 10 years old, which is either heartwarming or completely tragic, depending on your perspective. I've decided it's mostly heartwarming with a tragic center, like one of those lava cakes. My stepmother filed for separation 4 months later. I don't know the details, and I have not asked. My father seems genuinely lighter. He calls me every Sunday now without any of the careful watchfulness he used to carry. Last month he drove up to Ohio to watch a game with me in person, and at one point he said, unprompted, "I spent a lot of years letting someone else decide what I was allowed to know about my own kid." He didn't say it as an excuse. He said it like someone cataloging a mistake, so they understand it fully. My half-brother and I got dinner last month. He told me she had spent the years after his childhood managing everyone around her into versions of themselves that were convenient for her. I've been in therapy for it, he said, without any bitterness, just a guy reporting facts. She does it to everyone. You were just the most inconvenient. I told him that might be the most backhanded compliment I'd ever received, and he said, honestly, take the win. The thing that still gets me, the part I've turned over more than the rest, is that she thought it was permanent. She thought a forged letter and a carefully timed phone call were enough to rewrite someone's story forever. She didn't account for the fact that my grandmother saves voicemails on CD-ROMs. She didn't account for the fact that I read terms of service and keep receipts and have exactly the kind of slow, documented patience that her whole approach depended on people not having. Some people manufacture the truth because they genuinely believe the version they can control is better than the version that actually happened. The problem with that is that the real version is usually sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere, waiting. I was 14. I wanted to see the beach and maybe spot an alligator. That's the whole unforged story. If you watched this entire thing and felt that deeply in your chest, subscribe, because I've got more stories where a little patience beat a whole lot of entitlement, and I'm just getting started.